Chapter 13. Rigged, but not ruined. By now, you've seen the system for what it is. Not broken, not chaotic, not the result of 100 coincidences. But a structure, built quietly, adjusted steadily, defended fiercely. That tilts the game toward those with money, connections, and knowledge. Seeing this clearly is unsettling at first, then clarifying, then empowering. Because once you understand that the system is built, you understand something far more important. It can be rebuilt. You are not the problem. The system wants individuals to internalize every burden. Budget better. You picked the wrong program. You're not disciplined. You should have looked harder. It's a narrative perfectly designed to remove attention from policymakers who starve public services, corporations that exploit loopholes, institutions that privatize quietly, and tax systems that reward wealth. What happens when you see it clearly? Reading a book like this one is not a neutral experience. Most people who engage seriously with what's been described in these chapters go through something, not all at once. Not in a straight line. But there is a recognizable shape to what happens when a person moves from not knowing how the system works to knowing. And it's worth naming because the stages themselves are part of the story. The first is disorientation. It arrives as a quiet destabilization. The story you've been carrying about your own life, why some things worked out and others didn't, which outcomes were your fault and which were circumstance, starts to feel unreliable. The system was tilted. The rulebook you were told didn't exist was real, and it was being used by people who had it. If that's true of the tax code, it might be true of other things. If the housing crisis isn't primarily your failure to save hard enough, what else have you been blaming yourself for that belongs somewhere else? This is disorienting because it's revisionary. It doesn't just add new information to what you already knew. It reframes what you thought you knew. That kind of reckoning takes time, and it's uncomfortable in a way that's hard to describe to someone who hasn't been through it. You're not just learning facts. You're adjusting your account of your own life. What helps at this stage is exactly what this book has tried to provide. The mechanics, named clearly. Guided drift, not conspiracy, not chaos. A direction produced by consistent pressure over time. Jordan's path is not personal failure. It is the outcome of a specific policy architecture. Naming the mechanism doesn't make everything easier, but it makes it honest. And honest is where everything useful begins. The second is anger, not rage. Something more precise, moral injury. The feeling that arises when you understand that the promise of fairness was not a mistake or an oversight. It was a performance. That the institutions which presented themselves as neutral were operating with a thumb on the scale. That the complexity of the tax code was not an accident of accumulation, but a feature. One that protected its own complexity. Because complexity protects power. This anger is legitimate. It is proportional to what produced it. And it is worth preserving, because anger, properly directed, is an activating force. The danger is misdirection. The same misdirection the system is structured to encourage. When people are angry about outcomes produced by policy, there is always a ready supply of easier targets. Immigrants who arrived later, workers in other sectors, the neighbor who seems to be doing better. Anger that flows sideways is anger that leaves the system intact. The question is not whether the anger is justified. It is. The question is where it points. The answer this book has tried to provide throughout. Toward structures, not scapegoats. Toward the tax code that was written, not the person who used it. toward the policy that produced the housing crisis, not the people who are also trapped by it. The third stage is one that doesn't get talked about enough because it looks like its opposite. It is clarity that produces despair. This is the paradox at the center of seeing the system clearly. Once you understand the machine, its scale, its durability, its capacity to normalize itself across decades, its ability to absorb criticism and continue functioning, the next thought is almost always, if it's this big, what chance do I have? This is not an irrational response. It is, in fact, evidence of clear thinking. The system is large. It has defended itself effectively for 50 years. The people and institutions that benefit from it have resources, access, and patience. The people most damaged by it are, by design, the most financially stressed, most time-poor, most easily divided. What helps here is not motivation. It is evidence. Not the idea that change is possible, but examples of where it has happened and how. Credit unions were once the radical idea that communities could own their own financial institutions. Cooperatives in agriculture, in housing, in retail, demonstrated for generations that collective ownership was practical, not merely theoretical. Tenant associations have, in specific buildings and specific cities, prevented the displacement that institutional investors rely on. These are not utopian examples. They are working, imperfect, ongoing demonstrations that the market logic is not the only logic available. Clarity is not a burden. It is a tool. The person who understands why the housing market works the way it does is better positioned to act within it and to push against it than the person who experiences it only as a mysterious and personal misfortune. You cannot change a machine you cannot see. Understanding the mechanism is the prerequisite for knowing where to apply pressure. The fourth is agency. It arrives differently for different people. For some, it is a conversation with a neighbor, a co-worker, a family member, where something from these pages enters the world outside the book and changes what someone understands about their own situation. For some, it is a vote, cast with new clarity about what is actually at stake. For some, it is a decision to join something, a union, a tenants association, a local board, a political campaign. For some, it is simply the refusal of a particular story. The story that says the outcomes are fair, that the struggle is personal, that nothing can change. Agency does not require certainty. It does not require a complete theory of change or a comprehensive plan for dismantling the system. It requires only the willingness to act, specifically, concretely, at the scale available to you, with clear eyes about what you're doing and why. Havel understood this. He was not writing about revolution. He was writing about a greengrocer who removes a sign. The sign is small. The act is individual. But it is not trivial because it breaks the performance. It makes visible to everyone who sees it that the performance can be broken. And once the performance can be broken, the logic that required it, the logic that said going along was the only rational option, begins to lose its hold. This book has tried to take down a sign, to say plainly what most people who have been paying attention already sense, but have not yet found the language to name. The rules were written by people with interests in the outcome. They can be rewritten by people with a different set of interests, not all at once, not without difficulty, not without resistance from those whose position depends on things remaining as they are. But the direction of change is not fixed. It is negotiated every day by people who are still in the negotiation, whether they know it or not. You are now someone who knows it. We are still a country worth fighting for. Canada is not perfect. But its public institutions were built by people who believed progress should be shared. Those systems are under attack now. Quietly, strategically, but not irreversibly. The biggest lie of all, that nothing can change. The powerful want you to believe. This is just how things are. But history proves otherwise. Healthcare, weekends, workplace safety, minimum wage, pensions, child benefits, cooperatives, all once dismissed as impossible until people organized. Power and accountability. The mechanism is the same at every scale. The principle at the heart of this book: when power becomes sufficiently concentrated, it shapes the rules it then operates under. And those without equivalent power absorb the consequences, regardless of what the rules nominally say. The domestic version of this requires only what this book has documented: that over decades, across governments of different political stripes, the rules governing taxation, housing, charitable giving, public services, and financial education were each adjusted, individually and defensively, in ways that compounded to consistently favor those with capital over those with labor. No single actor designed the whole. But the direction of the pressure was consistent. And consistent pressure over decades produces the same result as design. It reflected whose voices were heard in committee rooms, whose lawyers drafted the amendments, whose think tanks produced the research, and whose campaign contributions funded the access. A formal equality of rules, a material inequality of influence. The strong, over time, shaped what could be enforced and what would be quietly ignored. The weak, over time, paid the compounded cost. The scale differs between nations and citizens. The mechanism is the same, which means the response is also the same. Collective action by dispersed actors who understand what they share. The future is not pre-written, it's negotiated. Once you see that the mechanism is real, that guided drift over decades produced the system we have, the logical conclusion is not despair, but agency. Systems that were steered can be re-steered. Rules that were written to serve concentrated interests can be rewritten. Change happens through voting with clarity, challenging bad policy, supporting public systems, resisting privatization, sharing hidden rules, rebuilding community, defending the vulnerable, and telling the truth plainly. This book isn't a call for revolution, but reconstruction. The work left to us. No one can fix everything, but systems bend under millions of small acts. Every conversation, every vote, every act of solidarity, every parent teaching real rules, every worker who stands up, every shared truth, every rebuilt community, every refusal to accept injustice. Little shifts, little victories, little awakenings. The system is real. It just wasn't built for you. Your life is not personal failure. Your struggles are not moral flaws. Your future is not predetermined. You deserve clarity. You deserve respect. You deserve a system built for the many, not the few. The Prime Minister warned that the world order is fracturing and middle powers must adapt or be shaped by forces beyond their control. He was describing the international system. But he was also, whether he intended to or not, describing the choice facing citizens at home. We can continue to accommodate asymmetry quietly, normalize erosion incrementally, and accept that the strong do what they can while the weak suffer what they must. Or we can recognize that power, like fairness, is structural, not inevitable. That systems drift in the direction they are steered. That the rules we live under are not natural laws, but human choices. made by people with an interest in keeping them as they are, and that those choices can be remade. The system isn't broken. It has been steered, but it's not ruined. Not yet. Not if we act. Not if we organize. Not if we refuse to go along. Middle powers must act collectively in a fractured world. Citizens must act collectively in a fractured domestic landscape. That's not a metaphor. That's the work. Now let's go build something worthy of the people living in it. Removing the sign. In Davos, Mark Carney told the world's middle powers it was time to remove the sign from the window, to stop performing a faith in an order that had revealed its own contradictions. The same call applies here. For too long, Canadians have kept a sign in the window of their civic life. A sign that says the tax system is fair, that public services are universal, that hard work determines outcomes, that the social contract is intact. We kept that sign up, not out of delusion, but out of habit, out of a taught instinct to accommodate rather than confront, to manage frustration quietly rather than name its source plainly. Havel's greengrocer wasn't stupid. He wasn't cowardly. He was navigating a system that made compliance the path of least resistance, and dissent the path of consequence. Sound familiar? The people in this country who followed the rules, paid the taxes, showed up, worked hard, and still fell behind, weren't failing. They were performing. They were keeping the sign up, trusting that the system would eventually return the fairness it promised. It didn't. Not because the people failed the system, because the system was never fully built for them. But here is what Havel also knew. The moment one greengrocer removes the sign, something shifts. Not because one act changes everything, but because it makes visible what everyone already knew and nobody had yet said out loud. That is what this book is. A sign removed. A truth said plainly. An invitation for others to do the same. The system wasn't built for you, but the people living in it are not ruined. They are capable, clear-eyed, and, once the sign comes down, ready. Ready to name it, ready to build something better, ready to stop living within the LIE. My father is not a symbol. He is a man in his mid-80s who worked, paid taxes, treated people fairly, and kept his sign up for 8 decades. He believed in the arrangement. He never asked for more than what the arrangement promised. He got a hallway, not because the system failed randomly, not because of bad luck or individual error, but because somewhere, across decades of individually defensible decisions, the arrangement was quietly renegotiated, and the people at the table were not him. That is drift. That is how it works. Not through a single betrayal you can point to, but through accumulated adjustments, each small enough to normalize, together large enough to transform what the system actually does versus what it says it does. The greengrocer kept his sign up, Havel told us, not because he believed it, but because the cost of removing it was real and the benefit was invisible. My father kept his sign up for the same reason. So did most of us.